So I get a lot of questions about some of the GIFs that I create, and I thought I'd just put together not necessarily a full tutorial, but a little quick overview of what a breakdown looks inside of After Effects for one of the projects. So a lot of people ask me to use PowerPoint or After Effects. Primarily I do the animation itself inside of After Effects. However, there is some Photoshop work that I do outside of the project, especially when it deals with tinting or cutting, pasting, and grade content. Any type of coloring or blending. Photoshop is much, much better for it. But once you have the pieces that you've put together, you can assemble them and then animate them a lot easier inside of After Effects. In theory, you could do all of this work in Photoshop, but significantly more powerful, quicker, and better quality to do it in After Effects. So for this particular Goodbye Chad GIF, these are the images that I imported. This is Calgary, Canada, that I put in as a background image. And then there's also this penthouse apartment view that's going on. You can see in Photoshop I cut out all the background so that Calgary would show through, and we could do some cool three-dimensional effects with that. And then there's this sign that was created here, which is an outline over here for our little moving image. And then over here I actually imported a GIF, and you could make this with you could make this GIF right here with some cool backgrounds, digital font, and then just move it along. But instead of doing that, I actually went online and there was a little digital sign maker, and so I made that. It popped out as a GIF, and then I just manipulated it and put it into my package. All right, so that's the Photoshop layers. And then, so the rest of the work is different layers. Some of them are video, some of them are GIF layers, as you just saw, and some of them are ones that I put together. So the admins were willing to share the individual frames, and in this case, I was able to get access to all the individual frames. And so by creating a composition with this, you can see these are all the individual frames put together. It actually splices the PNGs in a sequential file, or JPEGs in a sequential file, into a small video. And you can see here's the timeline down there. So I can actually move through the timeline and see what's going on. And this sequential video set of files actually brings him from here to here. It's not until you go in reverse that you actually get him going both ways. But this initial 30 frames, 30 some odd frames, is just him going from one side to the next. So the first thing I wanted to do was cut him out, and this is what's called Roto Tool process inside of After Effects. So if you highlight your video layer that you're trying to work on, and you click on this Roto Tool up here, let's see. Okay. So I see what I did wrong there. Once you have these items in this composition is a set of layers that you can put together to create a small video. It's kind of like a three-dimensional group in Photoshop. You're actually both what layers are there and how those layers look over time. Okay, so what you need to do is basically double-click this particular layer and go into it. So now I have a more detailed view. So when I'm in here, you'll see this little icon is green. And see the little paintbrush is green. So we're going to go ahead and use that to just draw lightly around. This is very much like the select tool, where you can freeform select in Photoshop. And we're just going to lightly go around the edge here using this Roto tool. And it does an okay job, but with video it's a constant challenge. Okay, and you can see this pink outline that's been created now. And this shows, sorry, you can see some extra content got brought in there, and some extra content got brought in there. And because the lighting on this changes so much, it uses both shape and lighting. This is actually a little bit of a challenge. But the next thing you want to do is hold down the Alt button. You'll see that the cursor turns red, or the paintbrush turns red, and basically just click the stuff that you don't want to include. And I can actually go right in there, and then right up here we'll go ahead and say don't include any of that. You can see the pink line's corrected itself pretty well. A little bit more work here. Oops, that was the wrong direction. Let's go like that. Okay. And then now, looking at this layer, if we go through and we go through frame by frame, the roto tool will now attempt to map it with that outline. So I'm actually going to go ahead and click it to do it real time. Now you'll see there's stuff popping out there and it's making some bad mistakes. Normally what you would have to do is go through and correct that one frame at a time. We can even try and do that if we come in here as soon as it starts to bleed out. And you can see the confusion is it's all yellow, so it doesn't really know where things start and where things end. And if I click on that, it may actually go into the leg. But that seems to be corrected, so now we'll go a little bit farther and it may bleed out again. Yeah, see, we've got some problems right there. Now it's all pink and etc. But overall, it does a pretty good job. Really, if you want a decent image that's not all cut up, you pretty much have to go through and do a lot of doctoring, fix this area, and all that stuff. But essentially, now that the rotor tool's been mapped for the entire image, we can go back to the composition that it's in, and you can see what's happened here now is it has gone through and used like a mask, the roto tool. So that's essentially the technology that I used to pull the little guy out. Then once I had the technology in place and we had this layer in place, the next thing that we do is add some effects. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but just to show you how this can work, click on effects and then we do color correction. This will look very familiar to you guys. We're going to go ahead and do a hue saturation layer. It looks a little bit different than it does in Photoshop. A lot of this is because you can change these controls over time. Remember, everything in After Effects is three-dimensional, so you not only have the values, but you have the values over time. So in this case, we're just going to turn the saturation level all the way down. That'll give us a nice white, crisp image that we can recolor on our own. So you can see how that guy's turning out. Now, the idea to make him go backwards was that we could take this composition that we have right now. So let's go ahead and go back to our project. We now have this new composition right here called, it's actually 3. And so I'm going to use this to make another composition. So this will be a new video I'm going to do. And you can see this video is actually, in its entirety, 1.2 seconds long. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to my composition settings, and I'm going to say, let's actually make this 2.4 seconds long. Okay, and then what will happen here is if I go back to the timeline, you'll see my video stops halfway through, my image stops halfway through and it just goes away. So I'll just make a copy of my composition. This is the coolness of After Effects. I now have 2 functioning compositions that are identical to each other, and I'll move this one out here. So now if I play it, my guy just sort of repeats halfway through and then repeats again. And if we click on this and we go to time and we change it to reverse layer, now that one goes backwards and this one goes forwards, and boom, we have all the way over here and then we go back. So now we have the full movement of going both ways. Okay. All right, so that's kind of an overview of how you get the guy out in the first place. After you've spent some time on it and you've cleaned it up, I'm going to just get rid of these 2 compositions because they're not helping us. After you cleaned it all up and you take those concepts, then this is a layer where I've taken the composition and I put this guy in here, and then I duplicated the layer and flipped it upside down, put it in the background and use some transparency. So that makes it look like he's transparent. If I stick the room back in here, it looks like he's got a reflection on the floor, which is great. And then I also duplicated that 5 times and stacked them on top of each other. And I created this composition right here. So this is one new composition, and its sole job is to have all 5 of those guys and their little reflections going full speed. And it actually is going to take a second. You can see this green line for the computer to render that and give us a preview.